The moment Britain said yes, Iran said you are now a target. That exchange happened on a single Friday, March 20th, 2026. It was one of the most consequential moments in British foreign policy since the 2003 Iraq invasion. Downing Street announced that the United States would be permitted to use British military bases to strike Iranian sites targeting the Strait of Hormuz. Within hours, Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi called UK Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper directly. He told her that this action would be recorded as participation in aggression in the history of relations between the two countries. This is not diplomatic language. This is a country with active military capability, formally placing Britain in the category of participant rather than observer. Iran has been striking targets across the Gulf every single day for 3 weeks. The consequences of that categorization are only beginning to be understood. It affects British families, paying energy bills and British military personnel at overseas bases. It impacts British foreign policy credibility and the trajectory of the entire conflict. Today, we are going to build the complete picture. We will look at where this decision came from and what Iran specifically said and why it matters. We will examine what the verified economic data shows about the impact on ordinary British households. We will see what is happening militarily across the Gulf right now, and we will look at what the evidence suggests comes next. Every number is sourced, every claim is verified. Let us begin. Operation Epic Fury, the US and Israeli joint military campaign against Iran, launched on February 28, 2026. This is confirmed by CENTCOM's own public releases on centcom.mil, the official website of US Central Command. That launch date matters because everything since has been a cascade of decisions made under the pressure of an active and rapidly evolving conflict. These decisions each seemed limited and manageable at the time, but together they have produced a situation that none of the actors involved fully anticipated 3 weeks ago. The verified preliminary casualty figures as of March 20th tell the human cost clearly. Iran's human rights activist news agency documents over 300 deaths in Iran. The Lebanese Ministry of Health has confirmed over 1,000 deaths in Lebanon. Israel has suffered 15 deaths. 13 U.S. military personnel have been killed, confirmed across CENTCOM public releases and Associated Press reporting. 21 people have been killed in Gulf states. These are preliminary figures, and in every conflict of this nature, they are eventually revised upward. Against that backdrop, Keir Starmer spent 3 weeks trying to position Britain as a concerned, constructive observer rather than a direct participant. The political logic was sound, as British public opinion has no appetite for another Middle East war after the Iraq experience. Parliamentary opposition across multiple parties has been vocal. The economic consequences of even indirect involvement, through energy price spikes driven by the conflict, are already visible in every British household's projected bills. But alliance pressure, operational reality, and Iranian escalation gradually narrowed Starmer's room to maneuver. He first permitted U.S. forces to use Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean and RAF Fairford in Gloucestershire for what was described as defensive action against Iranian missile sites, posing a direct threat to British lives or interests. That was already a significant threshold. Then, on March 20th, the terms formally expanded. ITV News confirmed the specific language from Downing Street's number 10 spokesperson. Ministers condemned Iran's expansion of its targets to include international shipping. The agreement for the U.S. to use UK bases in collective self-defense now explicitly includes U.S. defensive operations to degrade the missile sites and capabilities being used to attack ships in the Strait of Hormuz. The scope moved from protecting British lives specifically to protecting the shipping lane itself. That is a meaningful and significant distinction. The Strait of Hormuz is not a British waterway. It is a global choke point through which approximately 20% of all globally traded petroleum liquids pass every single day. Britain just officially committed its soil and its infrastructure to defending that choke point. Downing Street's spokesperson insisted the UK was not being drawn into the wider war. The official statement described the authorization as specific, defensive, and limited. Prime Minister Starmer himself said the best way forward remained a negotiated settlement with Iran, and that the UK's principles behind its approach to the conflict had not changed. Iran rejected this framing entirely and immediately. BBC confirmed the details. Foreign Minister Araghchi posted on X, writing that the vast majority of British people do not want any part in what he called the Israel-US war of choice on Iran. He stated that by ignoring his own people, Starmer was putting British lives in danger. Iran's foreign ministry issued an official telegram statement stating that these actions would definitely be considered participation in aggression and would be recorded in the history of relations between the two countries. The statement also said, Iran reserves its inherent right to defend its sovereignty and independence. Read that last phrase carefully. Iran reserves its inherent right to defend its sovereignty and independence in the context of a conflict where Iran has been conducting active military strikes on targets across multiple countries every day for 3 weeks. That phrase is not rhetorical. It is operational language. It is Iran communicating to Britain that British bases and British interests now fall within the scope of what Iran considers legitimate in its self-defense calculus. Now, here's the detail that makes the March 20th warning even more significant. It is hiding in plain sight in BBC's own reporting from 2 weeks earlier. On March 7, 2026, Iran's ambassador to the United Kingdom, Sayed Ali Musavi, sat inside the Iranian embassy in London and gave an extraordinary interview to the BBC. In that interview, Ambassador Musavi explicitly stated that if facilities, properties, or bases are used against the Iranian nation, they would be considered legitimate targets. He warned that Iran expected the British government to be very delicate and very careful in its actions. He confirmed that Iran would have the right to self-defense if the UK directly joined US-Israeli attacks on Iran. That was March 7th. The UK's formal expansion of base use permissions happened March 20th. Iran's ambassador told the BBC inside the Iranian embassy in London 2 weeks in advance and on the record exactly what the consequence of this decision would be. That is a documented warning that was publicly available before the decision was made. The decision was made anyway, and now Iran has formally delivered the consequence it promised. The building where that interview took place is itself historically significant. BBC noted it is the same building where a dramatic 6-day siege ended in 1980, when SAS commandos killed 5 gunmen and freed hostages. Iran does not choose its symbolic settings accidentally. Inviting BBC cameras into that specific building for a warning interview was a deliberate act of historical signaling. Iran was saying, "We remember everything," and now it has acted on that memory. The domestic British economic impact of this conflict is not abstract. It is landing directly in the finances of millions of households, and the March 20th decision to deepen involvement adds political complexity to an already painful economic reality. ITV News confirmed that UK household energy bills are forecast to jump by 332s per year from July 2026. Cornwall Insight analysts projected Ofgem's price cap for July through September at 173 per year for a typical dual-fuel household. That is a roughly 20% increase. To translate that into daily life, it is approximately $27 more per month for every typical British household, every month, starting in July. This is directly attributable to the energy price shock this conflict has created. Brent crude oil spiked 7% on Thursday to reach $114 per barrel, before pulling back to $109 on Friday. Dr. Craig Lowry told ITV News directly that while the price cap can shield consumers from short-term fluctuations, it cannot offset a sustained rise in wholesale market prices. The key word is sustained. Every additional week of conflict at this intensity adds to the structural pressure on wholesale energy prices. And Britain is now officially a participant in the conflict that is causing those prices to rise. The political irony is stark. Starmer acknowledged the pressurizing costs put on families on the same day his government made the decision that deepens Britain's involvement in the war. The broader Gulf military picture on March 20th confirms that Iran's operational capacity has not been neutralized despite 3 weeks of intensive strikes. ITV News confirmed that Kuwait reported 2 waves of drone strikes targeting the Mina Al Ahmadi oil refinery. That refinery had already been damaged in a previous Iranian attack on Thursday, before sustaining further strikes overnight. Saudi Arabia intercepted multiple Iranian drones targeting its oil-rich eastern province. Dubai shook with heavy explosions in the early hours of Friday morning as UAE air defenses intercepted incoming fire. The United Nations Security Council held an urgent closed-door meeting where Gulf countries explicitly stressed the need for Iran to halt its attacks on them. This is the operational environment in which Britain just formally extended its commitment. Iran is not conducting occasional symbolic strikes. It is conducting sustained, multi-country, multi-target military operations across the Gulf region every day. Kuwait's largest refinery has been hit twice in consecutive days. Saudi Arabia's critical oil infrastructure is being targeted. The UAE's largest city experienced air defense intercepts. Bahrain sustained physical damage. This is a theater of active conflict, and British bases are now officially part of its operational architecture. Qatar's LNG situation represents perhaps the most lasting economic consequence of this conflict for the entire world. ITV News confirmed that Qatar's energy minister Sherda Al-Kabi provided specific damage assessments. 2 of the site's 14 large processing trains at Ras Laffan Industrial City were hit. Those 2 units, producing 12.8 million tons per annum, represent 17% of Qatar's total LNG export capacity. The repair timeline is 3 to 5 years. The minister confirmed that China, South Korea, Italy, and Belgium face direct supply impact. He said Qatar may be compelled to declare force majeure on some long-term LNG contracts for up to 5 years. Force majeure in energy contract law means circumstances have become so exceptional that honoring the contract is legally impossible. For Qatar to invoke this language represents a generational disruption to global energy supply chains. The downstream consequences for industrial production, heating costs, and electricity generation in those countries will unfold over years. Bloomberg's reporting confirmed that the Swiss franc reached an 11-year high as investors flooded into safe haven assets. Bond traders are pricing in zero Federal Reserve interest rate cuts for all of 2026. The European Central Bank held rates steady while explicitly citing the Iran war's costs as a source of major uncertainty. The Bank of England held its main rate at 3.75%. India's stock market suffered its worst single day since June 2024. South Korean shares triggered circuit breakers. These are not isolated data points. They are the collective judgment of global capital markets about the duration and severity of this conflict. The U.S. president's public behavior on March 20th added layers of complexity that Britain must now navigate. The U.S. president posted on Truth Social that NATO was a paper tiger without the United States and called European allies cowards. He said the military fight was won and that the U.S. was considering winding down its efforts. He wrote that other nations who use the strait should guard it themselves and that the United States does not use it. Yet, speaking to reporters separately, the U.S. president said he does not want a ceasefire. He explicitly said, "You do not do a ceasefire when you are literally obliterating the other side." These are directly contradictory signals from the same president on the same day. Then ITV News confirmed the U.S. president's reaction to Britain's decision specifically. Asked about Downing Street's announcement, the U.S. president told reporters on the White House lawn that the U.K. should have acted a lot faster. He said he was a little surprised at the U.K. Britain just took a politically explosive step that prompted Iran to formally declare it was now participating in aggression. It will likely add hundreds of pounds to every British household's annual energy bill. And the U.S. president said it was too slow. This is the alliance dynamic Britain now finds itself locked into. Deeper involvement draws Iranian targeting language, while insufficient involvement draws American frustration. The parliamentary opposition's response reflects this impossible position with unusual clarity. ITV News confirmed that Liberal Democrats' Foreign Affairs spokesperson Callum Miller stated that Britain must avoid being dragged into another war. He explicitly invoked Iraq and demanded a parliamentary vote on the terms of the U.S. base agreement. Opposition leader Kemi Badenoch called the decision the mother of all U-turns. These figures are identifying a decision that they believe the public has not been adequately consulted on. The Iraq comparison that multiple opposition figures are reaching for is historically grounded. In 2003, the UK joined a US-led campaign with assurances about specific, limited objectives. The consequences lasted over a decade and included a public inquiry. The muscle memory of that experience is why British politicians are asking questions about process and oversight. Starmer's own stated answer, that the best way forward is a negotiated settlement with Iran, raises an immediate practical problem. A negotiated settlement requires someone on the Iranian side with clear authority. Iran's supreme leadership situation is currently deeply uncertain. ITV News reported that Iran's new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, reportedly delivered his second statement since appointment. But the message was read on state television on his behalf, with no video and no audio of the leader himself visible. ITV News noted this has heightened speculation about his physical condition since he has not been publicly seen since March 1st. The entity that just formally warned Britain is operating without a publicly verified, physically visible leader. This opacity is a structural problem for any diplomatic path forward. Ambassador Mousavi's March 7th BBC interview contained one more detail worth examining carefully. He confirmed Iran would not stop strikes on American military bases, wherever they are located, for as long as attacks on Iran continue. He said Iran's response depends on the activities of the Americans and the Israeli regime. That position has not changed. The military posture has remained consistently offensive. Kuwait's refinery was hit twice in 2 days, despite tactical diplomatic gestures. Saudi Arabia's eastern province was targeted, and Dubai's air defenses were activated. Here is what the verified evidence establishes as of March 20th, 2026. Britain has formally expanded U.S. base permissions. This is confirmed by ITV News. Iran has formally declared this constitutes participation in aggression. This is confirmed by BBC. Iran's ambassador explicitly warned 2 weeks prior that UK bases used against Iran would be considered legitimate targets. UK household energy bills face a 332s per year increase from July. Kuwait's refinery was struck twice in 2 days by Iranian drones. Saudi Arabia intercepted Iranian drones, and Dubai intercepted incoming fire. Qatar's energy minister confirmed 17% of LNG export capacity offline for 3 to 5 years. 13 U.S. military deaths confirmed. Over 3,100 Iranian deaths, and over 1,000 Lebanese deaths confirmed from respective authorities. The U.S. president called NATO allies cowards and said the U.K. acted too slowly. Iran's new supreme leader has not been publicly seen since taking the position on March 1st. Britain entered this conflict as a cautious observer and is now officially described by Iran as a participant in aggression. The path to a negotiated settlement requires preconditions that do not fully exist on March 20th, 2026. Every primary source cited in this video is linked in the description below. Read the primary sources yourself and verify every claim independently. Stay informed, stay critical.